Right, and we are live now. Good morning to everybody watching us. This is the Japan Expert Insights podcast with Tim Sullivan, my co-host, and me, Maya Matsuoka. And today we have another special guest who is coming to the podcast for the very first time, but I'm sure that you already know pretty well. And he's somebody who is very famous and well connected in the Tokyo community and outside of Tokyo, of course. This is Michael Perry-Clemons, who works in the field of finance, but he is also the founder of the non-profit organization YouMeWe. So I think that many people have met you, Michael, through this organization as well. And this organization, your project and your passion is the reason of you being here this morning with us. So welcome and thank you very much for coming. Before we go into the conversation, though, I wanted to give a minute to Tim because he has something to say, and from there we will move into
Okay, I'll
the
be
topic.
brief. Yeah, and at the risk of thinking I'm this self-important guy, I'm not. But as some of you, apparently at least one of you, noticed last week, I was absent, and so I just wanted to let everyone know. I had some family matters to attend to, but I'm back this week, and a shout out to Yuka-san for noticing. It was very sweet of you to show your concern. So I'm alive and well and happy to be back. And so just, in case some of you were wondering, because I can't remember how many of these we've done, but hundreds. And maybe that was the first, maybe the second one. Yeah, yeah. I have an echo now. You know what? I'll just shut up.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Okay.
Tim, could you please mute your microphone?
Yes, yes.
All right. And again, we are experiencing an echo. Michael.
Yes. Sorry, I just had an audio problem there.
All right, good. Thank you very much for dealing with it right away. And once again, welcome to the podcast. And thank you for agreeing to be our guest speaker today. It's really a great pleasure to have you with us because we admire what you're doing. And I would like you to tell us a little bit more because you have been in Japan for a while and you have been mostly in finance. But how did you move, or how can I say, probably expand your activities from finance into this organization and this project, the philanthrop. I'm sorry, I'm so my tongue is tied really. Okay, with the fundraising project and the charity projects you run through the organization.
Yeah, so you're right. I've been in Japan. I first came in '89, so I always tell people I've been here since Showa. The reality, I think, was in 2007, there was a lot going on in the world. There was the Lehman shock, there was subprime, and it really started making me feel professionally that there needs to be something more meaningful to what I'm doing, or at least an experience that I have. And so it just so happens at the same time I was invited to play Santa Claus in one of the orphanages in Tokyo, and I'd never honestly thought about orphanages or orphans in Japan up until that point. And so I willingly went into the orphanage and met all these children, and I just said I never walked out because we've always been connected this way. So I think for me personally, it was really trying to say to myself, how can I triangulate my experience with my passion and helping people? And so that's really how it started.
Right, and you mentioned that you were invited to be Santa Claus at an orphanage, and I would say that here in Japan, because Japan is a member of the wealthy countries in the world, and very few people realize that there are orphanages in this country as well, and that there are so many children here who are in need of help and support. And I would I always wonder, because you talk about orphanages, and we have had a couple of other speakers who also are in the same field of work. So, are there orphanages only in Tokyo, or do they exist in every major city, or do they exist through the whole country in Japan?
Yes, there's over 600 orphanages in Japan, with over 33,000 kids. And the truth about Japan, even though we don't talk about it that much, is there's roughly 3 million children living under the poverty line. And so I see this as kind of a poverty river that they're going down. And in a way, we've saved, if you will, 33,000 into institutional care, and we've kind of pushed 15,000 into foster care. But the United Nations Human Rights Watch, which is it was the other way around, that there was less kids in institutional care and more in foster care. I personally stay on the side of the institutions and the orphanages and working with them. But when you look at the kids in the homes as a pie chart, roughly it's extrapolated that a third are happy where they are, which is whom I think YouMeWe is focused on. I feel a third don't feel they have a voice, and so they're not going to tell you whether they're happy where they are or not. And that's where we started reaching out to the foster care world, because they do a little bit more in the children rights and white papers around children's rights that happen to be orphans. And then there's the third that like to be reunited with their families. And so I think when I heard these statistics, I thought, well, I can't just focus on one third of the kids. We need to be doing more. And so we've created collaborations with groups, for example, that train parents that were abusive and had their children taken away, and help them become better parents and give them better skills so they can be reunited with their kids. I personally didn't have this in the front of my mind when I walked into the orphanages, but I was abused as a child as well, but it really wasn't in the forefront of my mind, but it's there. And I would say, at my age of 57, I look at this as my superpower, because I can walk into a room and I can identify right away who's been abused or who is suffering. And at the same time, um, you know, I really just didn't want to meet the parents who had abused the kids, but I went down and met them. And so one father in particular said, look, when I grew up, people threw knives at me. And when I had kids, I really just didn't have the skills to be a father. But at the same time, unfortunately abused my son, and he was taken away. And when he was taken away, they diagnosed him with Asperger's and ADHD. And I felt this huge relief off my shoulders, because I realized it wasn't that I was a horrible father. It's that I didn't have the right skill sets to help a kid with special needs. He became trained, and then he became a trainer of the program on how to help parents. And now he has his son back. The gentleman on the right said, my family was great. It was my high school baseball team that abused me, and I took it out on my kids. I'm never getting them back. So I think when I hear that, in 1990, it was the first time in Japan that they made it the law that if you're aware that children are being abused and you don't report it, then you have an issue. And so in 1990, you saw 1,500 cases reported, not because the abuse increased, but because the reporting increased.
Mm-hmm.
So last year, a shocking number, really, if you compare it to, for example, car accidents, we had roughly over 350,000 car accidents in Japan, few of which probably are fatal, because as a society, we invest in airbags and safety of cars, etc. There was 250,000 child abuse cases in Japan last year. And that's not even per child. That could be 5 children per case. And so I think for me, the question in a country that has more people over 65 and less under 15 per capita, why do we have this consistent number of 33,000 kids in the orphanages? And when I look at our data, I see it swelling in elementary school, and I see it reducing, of course, in babies, because most likely people are having less babies. It begs the question that maybe once they enter school age, that the bigger challenges appear for the parents who probably not equipped to raise children. So the dark side of what we do is if these children were not in the homes, they would probably be dead. But we don't focus on that. We focus on the fact that they're in a safe environment. And I always say to people, don't feel sorry for them because they don't feel sorry for themselves. They're just getting on with it. And so the support that YouMeWe brings is essentially helping them in a situation where we say, none of us asked to be born, but when we are, we deserve everything life has to offer. So we can't do much about the circumstances in which you were born, but you have every much control over how you want your life to end up. So collectively, we ask them simply, what do you want to do? What do you want? And then we try to help them understand that that's possible. And then we walk them backwards. We call it 5-4-3. What can we do now so that you can accomplish what it is you want in 5?
Right. Because you mentioned that some parents, there are quite a few parents actually that they do abuse their children, but there are also some of them who learn. They get trained and they change their ways of communicating with their children and raising their children. So, if you allow me to go one step back, what do you think are other reasons for parents abusing their children? Because you mentioned that some of them have been abused as children themselves and they don't know any better. Others have been abused out of their home in their other communities, right? And they don't know any better. But what other reasons could be there? Because if we know the reasons, we'll be able also to work on them and mitigate them, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, Japan is really good. I learned this in banking. They're really good at data. And so if you drill down to ask who's abusing their kids, 40% of the abuse cases are nuclear families, meaning there's a parent or two parents. You can drill down to find out what percentage are single moms, what percentage are single dads. You could take the single dads and drill down and say how much is neglect, how much is physical, how much is sexual. Interestingly, the sexual percentage is always very thin because it begs the question, is it really being reported? But really, to answer your question, I think that's an enormous question. I think as a society and people living here, we should be asking ourselves, why are college professors abusing their kids? I mean, it's not necessarily people who don't know better. You know, even educated, highly educated people are having challenges in raising their children. Is it economic? Is it societal pressure? I don't know is the answer, but it really begs a huge question. Because if you think of it at the point of before a child, because there's one case where a child's taken away for abuse. There's also economic reasons. Like we have siblings in some of the homes where there are 5 siblings because their family cannot economically afford to raise them. So there's economic reasons, and there's true orphans in the sense that both parents were maybe killed in an accident, and they literally are orphans by the normal definition. But I think when you ask yourself, what is that point where the parent has to give up the child, and what is it that could have helped them up until that point? And then in my opinion it dovetails into the recent documentary that was done about single moms, and when you hear the plights of the fact that even though there's government assistance, it gets paid every 2 months. And the very basic question of if rent is paid monthly and groceries are paid monthly, why can't the government make payments on a monthly basis, etc.? So I think for a country that has 127 million people, last I checked, that's going to have by the year 2100, I see all these layers within those numbers. And I look at the layer of kids that we're focused on, not as marginalized kids, but maximizable kids. I think as we move forward, we need native speakers, or employers are looking for native speakers. They're looking for kids that have empathy because they've grown up with other kids with special needs that are different to theirs. They live in a structured environment. They get up at a certain time, they eat breakfast, they go to school, they come home, they do their homework, they eat dinner, they have their TV time and their ofuro. So these are very structured upbringings for these kids that are living in the homes. But there's a book called Children of the Japan State, and it talks about how the first social program in Japan dates back to the year 500 AD. And so that was the first instance where people were like, okay, we have a situation of children that don't have that nuclear family support. What can we do about this? And then through the book, you see it, coming up to the year 1200, where people said, well, for all children of the emperor, why aren't we looking after the children as if they're our own? And so over the years, you see it come up to modern time. I would say when I started in 2007, needless to say, 2025 is a totally different situation. I see much more investment by the government in not only their accommodation, but funding that's available for them to go to school. When we started in 2007, only 5% of the homes had Wi-Fi. Only 9% were going on to university versus the average of 70% of Japanese youth. And 33% were basically 2 grade levels behind their peers because of the trauma they experienced. Today, probably also in addition to COVID, I'd say 100% of the homes have access to Wi-Fi. I've seen that due to the fact that the government is helping with funding, that more kids are going to tertiary education, whether it's 30 or 40%, it's definitely grown from that 9%. The only number that really hasn't changed is that 33% that are suffering from the trauma that they experienced. So I think,
Right.
society, all of us, no matter where we are, Japan, my home country, America, what are the biggest plights of society? Homelessness, suicide, crime, and mental health issues. It all stems back to childhood trauma, in my opinion. And the more we can focus on how to alleviate that, educate about that. Even in my own house, I said, when our kids get ready for school, it's total mayhem in the morning. And the group that does the retraining, they said, well, did you ever think about getting ready the day before, the night before? I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a perfect solution. So I think, it's a policy question. I think for the government, I think that there are tests that can be taken for people before they get married to see what the red flag is, for an abuse situation. I think before they apply for benefits or for preschool, they should be forced to take this test just so that people are aware and they can maybe remedy the situation. I mean, basically, excuse me if I'm being verbose, but if a child's born in prison, it doesn't stay in prison. It
Right.
goes to a baby home, and in one instance, it's the Futaba home in Shinanamachi. So the babies from 0 to 2 are looked after the way humans have to be looked after. We have to be held, we have to be fed, we have to be nurtured. And then at 2, the only thing that I don't really like about the Japan system is they're then moved on to a more permanent accommodation. So you see the 3-year-old child hanging on to the leg of the new sensei because they're scared to death they're going to be moved again. I experienced that, so I know that's childhood trauma. And so then you basically have the course of them living until they're 18 and graduating high school. But in Japan, I don't think you need to go back to junior high school. So there's a constant urging for them to stay in education as long as possible. And then, if possible, go on to tertiary education and or employment. So on average, and these are very rough averages, I'd say about 50% go on to tertiary education, whether it's semangakko or university or college of some sort. I'd say roughly 48% find some sort of job. And then there's 2% in the special needs category that they think that we couldn't help. But we can. There's people that need to hire people with special needs for various reasons. And so to a great degree, I think it's about awareness, and I feel our job is just making it very clear to people that these children exist and how to help them, because I see them as maximizable as opposed to marginalized.
Right. Yeah. All those experiences in childhood, they really, when I think that when streamlined and when, well, let's say, when the kids receive care and love, and also they understand that they're valuable human beings, they can be indeed turned into something that is wonderful for society, right? They can be great contributors to society. They can create their own families. And I think that many people, many of those kids actually do their very best not to do or to abuse their children once they get their own, right? Because of that
We hope.
trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I love this, the way you said that we shouldn't be feeling sorry for them, but actually nurture them and, well, give them all the opportunities we can as individuals, as a society as well.
Well, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and so realistically, the 18-year-olds I met in 2007 would be in their mid-30s now, and so I never look at anybody as, for example, Maya's daughter or Tim's son. I look at them as Hiroki or Yuki, and so I look at them as individuals, and I don't associate them with their families because I don't know who their
Right.
families are. And by associating with them as individuals, I think that validates them to a great degree. That the fact that people are caring and showing up. In this space, I'm always surprised when I have an aha moment, and I welcome these. I was sitting with a group of teachers that were looking after one of the youth that had gone from out, he's aged out at 18, and then they move into a different home between 18 and 20 because they're not adults yet. And so from 18 to 20, they go into a different home and they have different supervisors. Well, I've known this kid since he was 14 or 15 years old. And I'm thinking, why am I, explaining to these supervisors how gifted this child is? But then I realize we may be the only consistency these kids have in their lives because we come every single week. Like we're in our 650th week at St. Francis, for example. And so I realized that, on the one hand, this is not a space to look for pats on the back or thank yous, but at the same time, we can't ignore the fact that it must be impactful that we show up every single week. And we've
Mm.
seen these kids grow up. I mean, from a little 3-year-old who had his little chin on the desk playing Minecraft, and now he's a bodybuilder and he's programming. Um, at the same time, I realize that these kids, some of them don't have dreams in the first place, and so we really help them by focusing on their lives and helping them visualize what their dreams are and try to push towards that.
Right, yeah. Because I have found it difficult for kids around me at the moment, and for example, the children around my daughter as well, to motivate them to study. You know that when they're 11, 12, very few kids are actually motivated to study hard. And I see it not only in my daughter, because she does study, but not as much as we would like her to, right? And I have found it difficult to find good motivators for these children. And personally, I also believe that children, they need to have playtime. And with the playtime comes also, the willingness to learn things. But also, I believe that the Japanese educational system is a little bit different, or quite different, depending on which country you come from. But it's different from my own country's educational system, because we were not expected to study so hard up until the age of 13, 14, 15. And I see that the situation here is different. So I don't know how this translates into the motivation of the children you work with and you meet in the orphanages.
Well, in 2007, which is a long time ago, because if you think about it, it was really right before the iPhone was launched, for example. I would say the internet was still, landlines. There was no wireless Wi-Fi when we were going into these homes. And so at that time, it was really a conversation around 21st century job skills and how children born today in Japan will live on average to be 107. And so I'm not going to be here in the 22nd century. So it begs the question, what can I be teaching kids that will live to the 22nd century? And I think as educators, we have to ask ourselves what's worth learning. And so I think on the one hand, it's communication, collaboration, and creativity with an emphasis on create and an emphasis on them being the creators of their own lives. But at the same time, in 2007, when I was at the investment bank, I could have easily said to them, you should maybe be an execution trader. But then over the course of time, algorithms replaced that role. So you can't tell kids now to strive for a certain job because A, jobs in 2007 hadn't been invented yet that exist in 2025. I would say
Right.
that the skills are the things that we should be focusing on. And I think what we learned in the homes and the kids we work with is I said, look, I'm not looking for compliments, but if you'd never met us, how would your life be different? And we call them ambassadors when they age out, by the way, and we call them champions while they're in the home. So we don't further call them orphans, and when they age out, we call them ambassadors because they end up representing us. And in many cases, by the way, they come back and they teach kids, and so it's gone full circle now. But I asked him, and he said, well, look, you brought in hardware we couldn't afford. You introduced software we didn't know about. And you basically, took an interest in us in a way that nobody else could. And so I think when I step back as a parent myself, if a computer can replace a teacher, famously it was said it should. I think if AI can replace any relationship you have in your life, it should. So the more we should be embracing technological advances, and we should really think back on why did the internet or anything, why was it invented in the first place? It really is supposed to be this panacea where we could check out books at the Vatican Library, or someone could, perform surgery online, etc. But I think the reality is so many companies were competing with each other. It's time for companies to come together and lift us all to the next level in humanity, to free us up so we can focus on poetry, we can focus on writing, we can focus on a lot of the analog skills that a lot of the kids probably not having experience with. And I think that as a society, don't send a text message when somebody's having a birthday, send them a card. Don't send a text message when somebody's mother's died, send them something. Make a more significant effort for significant moments, because everybody's kind of operating on the same level at the moment. It's just very much instantaneous, superficial. And I mean, imagine somebody at their inbox, like, here's the files for the meeting next week, I'll see you tomorrow, sorry your mom died, thanks for this report. And that's kind of the depth of how society is going. So I think as parents, we need to back up, and we need to force our kids to put the device down, and we need to force them to, well, I mean, it's good that they're proficient, because I don't even think, my kids could connect with their softball team or their basketball team if they didn't have Line. And so going back to 2007, I said, these kids need to be connected to the internet, whether you like it or not, because they will be left behind. And they shouldn't be sharing a device. They should have their own device. And if possible, it should be a new device, because few times do these kids get something new. Now, we've given out over 1,000 computers so far, laptops, so either we bought or we've had donated to us, and we send them out. We keep a small inventory so that we can do workshops, etc. But I would say, slightly to your question and point, after COVID, the education system changed. And I think there's less sports programs, there's less music programs, more coding, more emphasis on computer skills, because I think Japan is realizing they're slightly behind the rest of the world vis-a-vis these 21st, 22nd century job skills. And so that's a challenge for YouMeWe, to be frank, because now it's not such a big deal to get a computer, because I think most kids have some sort of tablet or laptop. And what it really is making it very intriguing and inspiring for them to learn a skill using those devices, whether it be video editing, whether it be video making, whether it be presentation skills. I'm finding little kids coming out and smacking my hand out of the way because they're redoing my presentation, and it looks 10 times better than I was able to do it. So I think, it's really going back to the premise that children want to learn in a fun and curious way. And we can't talk at them. And I think the Japan system is very Socratic, and they talk at kids for most of the time. But if a child's leaving the classroom and coming home to iPads, games, computers, and very interactive things, it's hard to keep their attention. And
Yeah.
so I think as parents also, we need to really, and the guardians in the homes, they need to realize that they're the teachers. They're the main teachers of their kids. Don't put it all on the shoulders of where they go for a couple hours a day. And so it's a challenge. I think it's a constant challenge, to be frank.
Yeah, it is a challenge. I have realized that after my daughter was born, that we always have to be very careful as parents because we are the teachers, realize it or not, because children, they learn by observing us and
Right.
they mimic everything we do. So, and I also am very aware that we have to be better human beings once the children are born because we don't even realize that the children are observing us all the time
Yeah.
and picking up everything. And I think that, as you said, that there should be some courses, training courses for new parents at least. And I don't know whether there are any. I remember before my daughter was born, there was a course in, the city which I was living in, and it was mostly a course about how to take care of a newborn baby. But there wasn't any talk about teaching the child what to do and how to teach them and so on, right? So have you noticed any changes there? Are there any
Well,
available programs nowadays?
yeah, it's called CPA, and it's performed by Yoki Kai out of Nagoya. And so Sugie Sensei has this NPO, and he's the one that we collaborate with for this program. And now his history, as his father was the first foster care father in Nagoya, and he recently passed at 90 something years old. They had over 100 foster children in their home in Nagoya over the years. And so being in that position and having that unique insight into the world of foster care children led him to start this program. And so when I say it's a policy issue, we can talk all day long about how it's important to do this, but it's a real program.
Mhm.
That secondly, he's gathered over 40,000 signatures on people that would like to have this almost placed into law, and so on a practical sense, there is something, and then at the same time, this is why I keep saying it needs to be policy. It needs to be the government that recognizes the necessity for this, because 250,000 abuse cases in and of itself is maybe not a huge number, but the growth from 1,500 cases in 1990 to 250,000 cases is extraordinary, and it really begs that question: why is this happening? How can we stop this? Because all of us are concerned about mental health. All of us are concerned about crime. All of us are concerned about suicide, especially in Japan. And I really just keep harping that this is what we need to do. We need to focus on childhood trauma and how to rectify situations.
Yeah, because childhood, as you said, childhood trauma, it continues throughout life. I think that in the first couple of decades, people are not aware of it until eventually they suddenly become aware. Something triggers that realization. And that's when really they start dealing with it. And it's a tough, tough period of time when anybody starts dealing with the trauma they had in childhood.
Yeah, we collaborated with Tell, and we did a video series with one of the psychologists who, I think it was 6 videos that we did, and she explained the concept of ACE, Adverse Childhood Experience. So, and in a test of 10 questions, if you score more than 4, you're considered an ACE survivor, and I scored 6. And so, on the one hand, it's explaining this is a real thing, and survivors of ACE have shorter lifespans because of the trauma and because of the physical effects that they experience. At the same time, the sensei at TEL was trying to explain to the staff in the homes, you're in a very unique situation because these are not normal kids. They have experienced trauma, and so when they experience trauma, you need to understand what a unique position you're in to try to help them, and so that certainly is out there. I think you're right. We don't realize this trauma until maybe we've already experienced it, and that's why it's really important for us to explain about boundaries and explain how it is your responsibility to do something if you see something that doesn't seem right to you, and not put your head in the cloud. Because before 1990, and I don't know what the Japanese terminology is, but I think you know the polished pole that's in a house that keeps the roof up in a Japanese house. And the nickname for that is head of the household. And so before 1990, it was basically what the head of the household decides what the corporal punishment is in their home. We don't get involved. And it wasn't until 1990, after 5,000 years of society, that people started taking it more seriously. And I just feel that, as a foreigner in Japan, it sounds like I'm shining a light on an area that people don't want to talk about, or they don't want to acknowledge. And that's not really my intention. My intention is to take my experience in the country where I live, and I will continue to live and raise my own family, and try to help, if not disrupt, the way things are going, so that people then can come together and focus on how to create solutions around it. Like for example, the word for orphanage is yogusetsu, and some people don't know what that means. They think
Yeah.
that's where people go who are handicapped, or they think that's where people go who need help, etc. And so even the terminology is not widely known by the public.
Right. Yeah. And have you found this? Because Japan is definitely a closer society. And when I say closer, I mean that things that are not pleasant to the eye or to the ear are not talked about very often. And you just mentioned that. But have you found it more difficult to work in this field here in Japan? And do you think it is basically compared to Western countries? There are some specific, let's say, obstacles that you need to be aware of and work around.
Well, I think when I went in 2007, and then I looked into my own country, America, I learned there are no orphanages in America. It's all purely foster care. And so I realized that maybe the orphanage concept is somewhat antiquated. And in many places like the UK, etc., you just don't see it. And so there's certain people that are against the concept of institutional care, and they think they should push more for the foster care world. My only personal feeling around foster care is only if the parents have rights. So if you have the guts, and I won't even say the heart, if you have the guts and the heart to bring in a child at 2 years old and raise them as your own, and then at 9 years old you get a phone call to go drop her off at Denny's parking lot because her biological mom is now no longer crazy and can take her back. She doesn't know this person. She's only known these foster parents. Foster parents can do nothing about it, and then they just drop her for sayonara. If you don't call that trauma, I don't know what is. And so I really find in the position I'm in, I wouldn't say constantly, but more than often, I'm presented with something that's overwhelming. Like I trained a young boy who happened to be multicultural, and so he had English up until he was 10, and then mom went to prison, so he came into the system. I met with him because he wanted to keep his English up, even though YouMeWe is not an English language NPO per se. And then I was at our summer camp, and another boy who looked very similar to him asked, "Is his brother there?" I said, "Well, who's your brother?" Because I'm trained not to ask questions about their families, etc. Well, siblings in separate orphanages. And so when I approached, I was totally overwhelmed by this. But then when I got the guts to ask the interim sensei, why is that the case? Nobody knew. So there's like someone above their pay grade that makes these decisions that the boys should be separated. So I went to a brother and sister who I knew were siblings at the summer camp. And they said, well, we're together, but her twin is in another home. And I have twin daughters. And I thought, I can't imagine my twins being separated should something happen to me. So I would have to say also that's the second part I don't understand about the system, why siblings are separated. And so I think to me that's traumatic. and yet at the same time, comparing to other countries, um, I'm in favor of an institutional solution, because I see too often that the kids grow up in a consistent environment, usually with the same kids, even though some come and go. And you see too often that they grow up to be well-rounded. They play piano. They're going on to university. They're completely healthy young people. The other thing, if I may, is I had another aha moment when someone asked me, "Do you realize how many protagonists in movies are orphans?" I never
Hmm.
thought about that. Harry Potter,
Right.
Elsa on Frozen, her sister on Frozen,
Yeah.
um, Superman,
Superman and Spider-Man.
Spider-Man,
Right.
Kung Fu Panda, I think his name is. There's this enormous list of orphans that are actually protagonists in our media, our entertainment. And so it begs the question: what is it about humans that really touches our heart for voting for the underdog, or voting and feeling for somebody who doesn't have the same kind of nuclear support family, etc. But at the same time, there's also another message. Superman had his human parents, so he did have people that were adults that look after him. Spider-Man had, I think, his aunt Polly. I can't remember her name exactly, but he had his aunt that looked after him. So I think that's the message to take away. Even though these kids may not have the nuclear family that everybody idealizes, they have to at least have somebody who cares about them, and who loves them, and believes in them and validates them. And then they can go anywhere with this. But I think the more that they feel um, tarnished by having the identity of being an orphan, and the more society, specifically in Japan, doesn't accept them, there's always going to be a challenge. I mean, I know of 30-year-old boys that are about to get married, I should say men, and they don't want to tell the families that they're orphans, because nobody's coming on their side of the family to the wedding. And they're petrified to say that, because they think that's going to make them not welcomed into the family. And then on the flip side, you see families that are like, "You're our family now." And you see them completely welcomed in, and you see them flourish because of that. So I think it's about um, facing realities. We can't have a country that has less people under 15 per capita in the world, and moreover 65 per capita in the world, and that is halving by 2100, and not seriously think about how to make every layer within the population maximizable and embraced, and part of the solution, rather than seen as contributing to the plight of the country.
Right. And so you mentioned that this is a big question of policy, of course, and it's been only recently that they have introduced different laws and so on. But still, policies they need to be improved and adjusted to the changing reality as well. And do you think that the Japanese government is open to it? Because recently they did create that children's agency. But we also know that bureaucratic procedures sometimes stand in the way of finding the best way to work in such situations. So, what is the situation here in Japan from your observations?
I would say, creating that agency was an enormous step in the right direction, and I think it shows the seriousness around how they are focusing on the youth, and specifically, this population of the youth. I think um, my own experience, for example, Konotaro came to the documentary about single moms that Ryan McElroy done, and he got up to speak, and he said, "You're right. The government should be doing more. The government should be aware of the the plights of single moms, etc." And I don't think there's anybody that would say it's a daft idea to look after these kids, but I also feel that. At the same time, these kids are getting 3 meals a day. They have a roof over their head. They have people looking after them. So if there's 50 children in an orphanage, there's generally 50 staff. And so I wouldn't say that, we're throwing them away and locking, them up with the key and forgetting about them. but to answer your question, I think everybody needs to be asking what more they can be doing. Often people come up to me at cocktail parties or any time and say, I'd love to adopt. And even though I've been in this space this long, I only know of one family that's adopted. I would just say, well, nothing's impossible. Go to your ward office and figure out a way to do that. And so it's not what people say, it's what they do. And so that's what I try to show in the example of what YouMeWe is doing, is that we're doing this, and we're not just talking about it. And our success is measured in decades. We're not about group photos and peace signs. We're about showing up week after week after week after week.
Yeah, the consistency and giving that presence or a stable presence to the children in the facilities. Right. And so I had another question, and sorry, I just feel so emotional now that it's, you know, the question went somewhere.
That's right.
Yeah, but well, right. I was thinking also that maybe a lot of people will oppose to this idea, and it's probably not very practical, but I personally, I don't see a problem for creating, let's say, a legislation that requires companies, right, to sign up for programs and also donate, let's say, every year a certain amount of money, and so that in exchange for that, they can be provided other benefits, right? So to me, it sounds like something that is possible, but do you think that there are already such programs here in Japan, or is any thought put into that? And is this practical from your experience?
I mean, as a banker, I look at companies and I think to myself, too many people are putting too much focus on the government. And I do feel that companies could be doing a lot more. I
Mm-hmm.
feel you could go into the lobby of any major company and roller skate, and the lobby is such an enormous space. And it begs the question, why don't they have daycare? Why don't they have a place for kids to be looked after so the parents can work upstairs safe? I think that from my knowledge, when my number was implemented, they found out that there was $500 million in accounts that were dormant because people either died and nobody knew that, or maybe it was Yakuza money that nobody wanted to admit was theirs. And so this dormant money got swept into a special fund for children, but it went to all the usual suspects. It went to all the same kind of established NPOs that probably didn't need the funding but got it because it was a safe way for those funds to be dispersed. I'm not sure if it's so much about requiring companies to do it as it is coming to terms with the whole concept of CSR and CSB. So I think CSR people, the ears shut because they think it means money. And my view as a banker is you actually save money by having CSR because a person works at your company for several reasons, one of which is they want to be proud of who they work for. Number two, they like the fact that by coming to work every day, indirectly profits are going to donations to help the community. And so even by showing up to do maybe their not so stimulating job, they know they're giving back. And so I think when you look at the price of turnover and replacing people, etc., it's expensive. And
Right. Oh, I think that we
take it a
lost.
step further, I think it's corporate shared values. And so when you look at like Coca-Cola, how much water do they return to the community, compared to what they take from the communities, and in many cases they return more water actually to the community. So really getting in sync with companies that are like-minded and that are doing it because they want to, not because they feel they have to, is really the challenge. And so we're extremely fortunate with a lot of the companies that we work with, that they have shared values with us, and we're more than happy, to help them on that journey. But I would say, compared to other countries, I think Japan defines philanthropy differently. So, for example, if an investment bank is funding windmills, they see that as giving back to society, and it is, but it's not giving back to single moms who
Mhm.
have to give up their children because they can't pay their rent. Um, it's not giving back to full right scholarships for kids to get a proper education and not have to worry about living expenses so that they can get through school and get a degree and start working. It's really looking at how we want life to end up in Japan and going backwards to implement in the current time frame solutions to make that happen.
Right. No, I actually appreciate what you said, that we shouldn't always look up to the government to do things for society. And grassroots diplomacy, let's say, and the work there, and also the companies themselves, they can do actually much more than if they wait for the government to well, introduce this law or that law or create policies for them. But at the same time, as you mentioned in the beginning of today's conversation, such initiatives and such projects, they need publicity as well, right? Because very few people seem to be aware that Japan has a problem with children, disadvantaged children. So how
I
do you
think
do?
Japan is still very patriarchal, so if you're able to get people at the top of that pyramid to buy in and understand it, then you're probably going to have more success as opposed to a bottom-up effort. And
Mhm.
so we toy with the idea of doing an Encho Sensei seminar so that the Encho Senseis who usually are male, I'm afraid, and at the same time usually retired high school teachers or bureaucrats, but in all honesty, when we started our work with YouMeWe, no one even knew what Zoom was because Tokyo is not Japan. And so when you go out into the countryside, Tohoku, etc., people just go from one meeting room to another to meet people or drive across town. And so it was a huge learning curve for people. And in the beginning, we bought staff computers as well, just so that they could be modern and start using SharePoint and things like this. So I think this is going to be the challenge going forward. But at the same time, once we found the Encho senseis were on board, it was almost as if we were handing them the solution that they'd been seeking. And I think, frankly speaking, on the one hand, the kids are in hiding, so they're naturally worried about who's coming into these homes and who's wanting to get in contact with them. But then on the flip side, you see more open-minded Encho senseis that are like, well, let's just give them access and see what happens and deal with it later. So you have both ends of the spectrum as far as giving kids access and helping them. But I think that's the solution in modern day Japan. It's still very patriarchal.
It is very patriarchal. Yes, the very first. Actually, it's I have discovered one thing, that usually the Encho sensei of Hoikuens are women, and
Yes.
and then the older the children grow and the facilities for older children, you see basically male Encho senseis, right? So they're men, which is a fascinating dynamic here, but it makes sense to a certain extent because the society perceives women as the initial and very first caregivers, right, for young kids and everything. But still, it is interesting to me because I can see that, especially in my daughter's elementary school, there is an equal number of female teachers and male teachers. But all the two, when I say that, we have seen only two directors of the school. Both of them are male, and we haven't heard of a female director of this school because we know more or less the history. And yeah, but thank you very much for mentioning that, because that's definitely one way of working working to get more, let's say, publicity and to educate the society as well. So and are there any other difficulties that you have discovered working here in Japan?
Um, I think I could probably create a long list of those, but what we try to see is where is the path of least resistance, and we feel For example, we send our newsletter to all 600 orphanages every month, and we're looking at who's opening it. Few. And so then we created a postcard, which costs money, with a QR code, because we thought maybe if they have something tangible in their hands, they would be provoked to open it and see, number one, YouMeWe is offering computers to kids that need them. And so that's one thing, but also keep in mind that we're also giving it to 18-year-olds when they leave the home, so that they have their own device. And then if they've gone to university and their computer breaks, we're happy to help them replace it, because they don't have a family member to call on to help them with the expensive cost of replacing, etc. But we're talking about YouMeWe today, but there's also another group we've created called Empower Village. And it goes back to my hedge fund days, where we had a group called Alborn Village, which was online, and people could go there for, it was set up in like this cartoonified village of having, the town hall, etc. And so YouMeWe has created Empower Village as a home for the kids to come home to. And so they're all Empower Villagers. And so what we do there is we go out to companies that are looking to recruit youth and pair the demand with the supply as much as possible, because 1,600 kids turn 18 every year. And so that's a high number of kids that probably are seeking employment. Number two is we do coaching. And so even when they're aged out and even when they have a job, I guarantee you they still need help. And so our collaboration with the International Foster Care Alliance encompasses something called a permanency pack, where we basically say, I personally have 6 packs signed between aged out youth. And I say, these are the 44 things that I'm willing to do for you as an adult as you enter adulthood. And you should do it with your own kids, because you realize that's a lot. And the reason it was designed is because if a foster kid, for example, is welcome to come to my home for the holidays, but then they want to do their laundry and I have an issue with that, I'm like, no, you can't use my laundry machine. That can derail a relationship with these youth. And so the 44 questions is basically to preempt any kind of disagreement or misunderstanding. You need help with money? Contact me. You need help with legal situations? Contact me. So we go through all 44 items and they check them. We sign it. We shake hands. They get the original. I get a copy. We take a picture. And then there's also something we've been working on with Wanagana, which is another NPO that helps people volunteer, etc. And they're helping create an online version of what we call Transition Toolkit. So where your family may have taught you how to decide between insurance policies and bank accounts and all these other things, the Transition Toolkit is for different stages of their adulthood that they don't have anybody to consult with. And so Empower Village is really important because we never say goodbye. I mean, we essentially are here for them. And what we're hoping is it creates a community even when I'm no longer here. Because I couldn't reach the kids that were 18 when I started in 2007, because there was no line. I don't even know if Facebook was around then. But every laptop we send out now, we put a sticker, and so that they know how to reach us and come back to us. And what we hope is what we're starting to see is that it's gone full circle. So the ambassadors are coming back and they're coming up with ideas, and they're helping me refine the view, and they're helping me refine the approach. And so currently, I would say YouMeWe is not focused on kids from 2 to 18. We're focused on teens and above. And we want to talk to them about their dreams through territory mapping and their desires. And territory mapping is just what is your goal, your hurdle, and what are the 3 things, what are the swamps and the rivers and the mountains you have to overcome. And then they pictorially draw this out. But then the next stage is financial literacy training with them, to ask them how much money they think they need once they turn 18. And then when they add it up, I remember this young girl was like 15, and she looked at the total and she said, I guess I'm going to have to get married. I said, no, that's not what you should be thinking. You should be asking yourself what job you can get to afford this. And then we do career assessment testing so they can see very quickly the list of jobs that they show potential for. and the majors that they should focus on in university. And then we talk about the skills that they should be focusing on. So in modern times in 2025, I would say we're looking at a way to kind of mentor the kids so that they go into university or employment with a mentor. It's something like 90% of kids, if not 98% of kids, drop out the first year of tertiary education coming out of the foster care. Those are stats from America. We don't know exactly in Japan, but probably the same. Only 2% of foster care kids finish their 4-year degree. Why? Because they don't really have a mentor in their life. So we're really shrinking down, going deeper, and focusing on how we can mentor these kids so that they can get through their education and feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves through Empower Village.
Right. Wow, I just cannot imagine how much work you have and how much time and energy and effort you have put into developing all these opportunities for the kids here in the facilities in Japan. And I think that, well, the broader we spread the word, the better it is, because people do need to know. And the more people know, I think that the awareness will be better. Hopefully, parents who abuse their children will also think twice and probably get some training as well. Well, and we have gone beyond 9 o'clock now. So, Michael,
Okay.
yes, the time flew, and I didn't realize that we were after 9. But yes, this is the time when we usually say thank you, and thank you so very much for
Yeah,
sharing
thank you.
everything you do.
You're welcome.
And of course, to everybody who watched, if you haven't connected with Michael, please reach out to him, connect with him on LinkedIn. Are there any other ways for people to get in touch with you, Michael?
Well, I mean, we have Facebook, we have LinkedIn, we have Instagram. I think we've got TikTok, we've got Twitter, we've got almost every channel. But I think LinkedIn for sure, um, and and uh, and then just simply hello at YouMeWeNPO.org is the main email account, so anybody can
Is you,
contact.
me, we one word?
It's all one word. So
Okay.
YouMeWeNPO.org. And
NPO.
incidentally, the reason we call it YouMeWe is we feel like everything in the world starts with these 3 words in any language. And at the same time, I think it was Muhammad Ali who was giving a speech, I think at Harvard, and they asked him to give one of his speeches, and he just said, me, we. And it became the shortest poem, I think, on earth. And we just added you, because we really feel everything starts with you, me, we.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, it's just inspiring hearing you. You know, we talked about a month ago,
Right.
and I was inspired then. But wow, you're such a good person. Really, thank you.
Oh,
And
thank you very
in the
much.
comments, similar comments were made. So
Oh,
you're a very inspiring person, and it's through your actions. So thank you so much for all of that and for today's presentation. My apologies, I had to shut up because of the echo, but that was probably better because I wanted you got your space to talk, and you made it a meaningful podcast. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And well, to everybody who stayed with us and listened to the story of you, me, we, and Michael, the inspirational projects he talked about. Thank you once again, and have a great week, and have a great day as well. So
Thank you,
that's it for
everybody.
today. See you next time.
Thank you.